everybody, and welcome to the Turtle Tea Podcast.
My name is Flipper the Turtle.
And my name is Shelly the Turtle. And today, we are going to be talking about Dramageddon 3.
Or Carmageddon, as I guess they're also calling it.
So, if you are familiar with the YouTube community, you probably already know what's happening. This is a situation involving some of the biggest beauty gurus or beauty community YouTubers, as well as Shane Dawson. And we just wanted to talk about what's happening, but we're not going to be doing a summary of what's happening, because if you're here, you probably already know.
Yeah. I think we just kind of want to talk about how we feel about the whole situation, what our thoughts are.
Now, before we get started, we did want to put out a disclaimer for this video. Everything that we will be talking about are allegations. Nothing is a fact. They are just things that are public knowledge that people have been accused of, or there are our own thoughts and opinions, but none of this has in fact been confirmed or verified. So everything is alleged.
Nothing has been proven in a court of law, and we are not going to say otherwise. So don't come for us.
Also, I would like to put a trigger warning for this episode. We will be talking about sexual and emotional abuse. Some of these accusations involve minors or animals, so I did want to put that out there. We will also be talking about racism and just various topics that might be difficult for some people to hear. So if any of that might trigger you for any reason, maybe you just want to skip this episode.
Yeah. It's going to be a tough one, especially at certain parts. So this whole situation is really insane to me, especially looking at where we are at with Dramageddon 3.0 versus 1.0. This is so much bigger, and I remember when the first one happened, just how angry everyone was, and the emotions that were in it, and how raw the feelings were, and how hurt everyone was after. And I literally look back now, and it's just so silly. That's the only way I can really describe it, is it was so silly.
Yeah. That was actually quote-unquote drama back then, where it was just friends and ex-friends being shady to each other, but nothing was like serious, potentially even criminal allegations. It was just, oh, this person was not a good friend. Oh, well, is it true or is it not true? And then people supported different parties. But it was nothing compared to the horribleness that is coming out now.
Yeah. And all of the stuff that's coming out is just, like we're saying here, compared to the first one, it's awful. It's so awful. I was definitely a person who, by the time YouTube came out, I was an adult. You know what I mean? So previous to that, I had lived a childhood without kind of the modern internet as we know it, with social media and YouTube. And then by the time I eventually became an adult, Facebook, YouTube, Twitter, all these things exploded. And around that time, this is something I've talked about with Shelly, and Shelly will attest to this. I feel like we are in a different era of the internet now than we were from about, I would say, 2005, when YouTube and all these platforms exploded, up until, I want to say, the adpocalypse that happened because of PewDiePie and a bunch of other people, right? That was like, I don't even want to call it a golden era. It was just the beginning era of the internet as we know it. And around the time the adpocalypse happened, people became more self-aware. I think the platform matured and more people were online. Back between 2005 to 2016, not everybody had computers. Not everybody had smartphones. Not everybody had tablets. Having a desktop or a laptop back in 2005 was a big deal.
Yeah, I barely had, like, I think my first cell phone
Yeah.
in that year.
So around the time that YouTube was coming out, very few people were actually watching it. Only people who had access to fast internet connections and a device that could actually visit the website and watch the videos could see it.
And then they had to have also money for the data.
Yeah.
Now, again, we have all these, like, unlimited internet plans and things like that, but back in the day, they charged you for just using even a little bit.
Yeah. Between like data usages for phone plans when people were trying to watch it on Blackberries, if anybody remembers that, or the first generation iPhone, and also when you were trying to watch a video over a dial-up connection. I did that. I remember listening to some music videos over, dial-up when I was a kid on YouTube. But it just created this bubble. It created this universe of a small group of people who had access to cameras, microphones, editing software, and computers. And YouTube gave them a platform to say whatever they wanted and do whatever they wanted without the public really knowing what was going on. It was just
It was like the Wild West.
Exactly. It was literally the Wild West of the internet. No, there were no laws. Absolutely no one was held accountable. Everybody laughed at every joke, no matter how horrible it was, because there's one thing I want to talk about. Shane Dawson has crossed the line. I didn't watch him back in the day. I didn't know about this stuff. He crossed the line on so many occasions, and I am appalled. I cannot say that enough. But this Wild West bubble, this era of YouTube in the beginning, there were a lot of other YouTubers who did the same stuff who aren't getting called out right now.
That is true. Like, no one was censoring the platform, no one was controlling what could be monetized and what couldn't. And I mean, even nowadays, we see horrible things like the whole Logan Paul Forrest thing that to this day he just got a little slap on the wrist, never was held accountable by the platform. They should have literally banned him from the platform.
Yeah. It's insane that part of that mentality still exists today.
However, at least we're seeing some accountability, but back in the day, there was none whatsoever.
Yeah. It's really, really upsetting too, because we also see the effects that the fame that was created from this era, we see those effects in these people now. I know when I first started watching YouTube and I watched all the videos from my favorite, we didn't even call them creators or YouTubers or anything. It's just people who posted, I would say this YouTuber's name or that YouTuber's name. I remember when people coined the phrase YouTuber and people started calling themselves that. That was their profession. I remember watching them because they were so real. They were authentic people who were just saying what they felt needed to be said.
And it was so refreshing to have that almost person-to-person friendship conversation. At least that's how you felt, even though it was one-sided from them. Because it was such a contrast from scripted TV shows and movies, which were also heavily censored.
Yeah, that was one issue. Before 2005, before this beginning era of the internet, you had flash animations and weird 3D animated dancing GIFs and MIDI files. Remember old HTML web pages and stuff that looked just awful? The internet was a different place before then. And we weren't going there to consume mass quantities of media, like Shelley has said, on television, in movies, in books, on radio. You remember, back in the day, people used to ban books from libraries. Even at the library, books were censored.
Yeah. So people, I feel like, were able to connect on such a personal level with these YouTubers. And also, at the same time, the YouTubers were like, I can do whatever.
Yeah. There was just always this, I noticed this growing up, because you were surrounded by the constant censorship. If you said a joke that was in poor taste, your parents would pull you aside, and depending on who you were, they would like, get really upset with you and scream at you, or they would tell you quietly and try to teach you, or some parents might smack you upside the head. I don't know. But we were all censored.
We're not saying that that's okay. Just
No,
by the way.
These are just things that happened.
Yeah, but it happened. So many people were raised like that. They had immediate consequences.
Yeah, there were immediate consequences to stepping outside the social values that society as a whole were trying to instill in us. And I just always felt like there were so many things I couldn't say. And it was so refreshing because I would go hang out with a friend, right? Just me in real life. I'd go hang out with a friend, and maybe every once in a while we would say
a swear word.
Exactly. Yeah, because I could never swear growing up, but I would hang out with my friends and we would throw a swear word out or two, and it was so refreshing to just be with that small group of friends, and you could like say a swear here, say a swear there, just to show that you were really upset, and then go back home and pretend to be like the perfect person who censors everything, just like the world around us. And I remember how wonderful it felt to watch a person somewhere else in the world, not a couple doors down from me, someone in another state in the United States, in another country. Let's talk about some British YouTubers here, Dan and Phil, people like them in another country. They were in my home, saying this weird, crazy, kooky stuff and swearing. And back in the day, talking about how parents were really, really annoying because they would always shut you down, and talking about how awful high school was. We could all relate. Here we were in this bubble with this platform, no censorship, everybody's connecting, and all of these people who just had access to cameras became famous over the course of a couple years.
But as a consequence, these people became so famous that they started to become less relatable because they became millionaires, entitled people, and just thought they were above everyone and everything, basically above the law. They could just do whatever because they would have such a big following that would always idolize them.
That's true. And so you started out with these really fun, really interesting people who were very charismatic, who were just putting content out there, letting everything loose, and you ended up with monsters, basically. To this day, there are some people I can't watch anymore because they think they own the world, and they don't. They were a person with a camera on the internet back in 2005. They weren't actually that special. I enjoyed watching them, but somehow, for some reason now, they think they're royalty.
Yeah, it's really sad. I have basically had to leave behind most of the people I used to watch. And I was pretty late in the game, like joining YouTube. I used to just use it as a search platform to look for basically how-to videos. Let's say how to make this craft or how to fix this thing at my house. And it was only later that I discovered that there were these people who were YouTubers. So I joined the community pretty late on.
Yeah. I was there fairly early on. I remember in 2005, 2006, because there was actually, I remember the whole huge thing blew up at first, where Google Video was a thing. Do you remember Google Video?
Not necessarily.
Google was actually used to be a platform where you could get a Google Video account and upload videos into Google, like YouTube. Right? And I remember YouTube was its own company. And what happened is Google ended up buying YouTube, and it integrated everything in together. I remember like that happening.
Really?
Yeah. So I was there at the beginning watching goofy videos, cat videos, how-to videos on Google Video, and someone was like, "Oh, check out YouTube, it's so much more fun." And then Google bought them out. So I've been around for a lot of YouTube's life, starting back in 2005, 2006. But I was really, really late getting into all the other platforms like Twitter. I was never into MySpace.
Yeah, still to this day, I'm not on a lot of the platforms.
Yeah. So YouTube has been primarily the only platform I've ever really stepped into. But getting back to the creators, they came onto these platforms early on. A lot of them went multi-platform right away. They had Facebook pages and Twitter pages. Is it a Twitter page? I think it's a Twitter page. They had YouTube channels, and they became extremely famous, and they became extremely entitled and
Influential.
very influential. Like, people that age should not be influential.
Nope.
As a person who's older now, I can honestly say I've had to go through stuff in life. I think everyone, once you get to a certain age, you look back and you go, oh wow, I was not very smart when I was 15, 20, 25. I had so much to learn, so many life lessons that I was clueless about.
And I also want to explore the idea that it's really difficult actually to put an age where you are considered to have learned everything, because we never stop learning, right?
Yeah.
But at some point there has to be an age where you are held accountable, and in many countries that's 18 when you go from a minor to an adult.
Mm-hmm.
That being said, there are some things that are unforgivable even if you're a minor, for example, murder or that sort of thing.
Yeah.
And on the other hand, there's some things that are maybe easier to look over even if you're in your 20s, 30s, because people have different life experiences and mature at different rates. So it's very difficult to know when you can expect someone to be reasonable and not do stupid things on the internet.
Yeah.
So that's why if you're out there and you're wanting to start content, I'd say at the very least wait until you're like 25, which is when they say the brain all like fully has developed. Although that doesn't mean that that's a good idea. Maybe you want to wait more, because we're always looking back and being like, basically, I was an idiot back then. Now, it's very different also to do stupid things or to have poor judgment, and the things that are happening right now that have come to light, especially about Shane Dawson.
Yes.
Because we all knew from when we were little that these things are completely wrong to the point that they are potentially criminal.
Yes.
It's one thing to put out a silly prank where maybe you hurt someone's feelings, but it's a completely different thing to sexualize children, to have grooming behavior, to have bestiality behavior. Those things are just completely insane.
I honestly do.
They're evil.
Yeah, I look back, I'm at a loss for words, because that should never have been allowed on the internet. Like, people in the past have like had a nipple slip or been a little bit suggestive with something, and they got age gated. They got
What's that?
That's the little flag you can click, and it says this video should only be for people over the age of 18.
Okay.
Yeah. People have age-gated videos for a lot less. People have taken down videos for a lot less. It is insane that just because he was a massive YouTuber with a big following,
who was bringing in a lot of money for YouTube.
How strange that's the case. I'm only alleging this. But he was bringing in tons of money, but somehow all of his predatory behavior, all of his like sexualization of animals and stuff like that flew under the radar.
Yeah. And for me personally, I only got to know Shane Dawson like a few years ago, a couple years ago, just with his like more recent documentary series, and before that a few of the conspiracy videos also. And I knew that before that, from what I heard and stuff, that he was like completely crazy and hyper, so I didn't go back and watch those videos because they didn't interest me. I knew that sometimes he was like disgusting with food, that kind of thing also doesn't interest me. But now that he was talking about like conspiracies and doing these documentaries, That's what I watched. Whenever I find a new YouTuber, sometimes I will go back and binge watch stuff, but usually the YouTuber has been on the platform for like a year and they don't have thousands of millions of videos. They just have dozens of videos, right? And I sometimes catch up and things like that. But Shane Dawson was not someone I did that with because, first of all, he had too many videos. And secondly, I had heard that he was very kind of crazy back in the day. But I had no idea that he had all these more than problematic behaviors.
Yeah. It's because I knew of Shane Dawson earlier on, but that was a long time ago. It was in the early 2010s that I was made aware of him, but he had like that emo swooped hair, and he just went out of his way with this super fake edgy persona, you know, that edgy humor that everybody had to do on the internet back in those days because you could only be funny if you were saying something shocking. His really, really bad edgy persona that he made up, saying the most shocking stuff that he could.
But you didn't, like, all of the clips that have resurfaced, you had never seen any of those.
I had never seen these. I had seen him talking about, like, pimple popping.
Ew.
And I heard about him getting into arguments with people and stuff like that. That stuff was really problematic. But years later, I found him again because of his documentaries and his conspiracy theory videos. He really seemed like he had grown as a person, as I had seen a lot of other YouTubers on the platform grow. With all of the stuff I had known about him, I kind of figured he had just grown up. You know, people grow up. People look back on their pasts and they do say, oh, that was dumb. But everybody's weird when they're young, and everybody kind of tries to come into their own. So I didn't ask any questions. So all of this stuff has come out, and I'm shocked. Like I said earlier, this should never have been allowed on the platform at all. And I'm glad it's coming out now. Everybody's coming out now saying, oh, he's apologized for it, or oh, it was a long time ago. But you literally said there are some things that are just not forgivable, and he did those things. He crossed those lines.
And don't get me wrong, we actually really appreciate dark humor sometimes. If you censor everything all the time, well, then no one's ever going to be able to say anything ever again.
Yeah.
But there's a reason why certain things are illegal. And when you're making content that is bordering illegal behaviors, that's straight up wrong. Some of the reasons Shane has used to justify his behavior is, oh, it was just a skit, oh, it was just a joke, which, let's say we actually say, okay, jokes are okay. Not that I'm saying that, but let's put ourselves hypothetically in that situation. A lot of the videos that have come out were not just skits and jokes. They were actually him interacting with real people, or him like sitting down in his car to say his real opinion about something. It wasn't within a skit or a joke.
Yeah.
So, for example, when he was saying inappropriate things to minors, that was a real person there. It wasn't an actor hired for a skit. It was a real minor who he was saying those terrible things to.
Yeah. And you can't justify that.
No.
At the end of the day, you can try and say, it was so many years ago, it was this, it was that. I was playing a character. I never stopped playing the character. That doesn't justify it.
And also, if he claims that he has grown and nowadays he does understand that that's wrong and things like that, well, why were those videos still up?
Yeah.
And I'll tell you why. Because they still brought in money.
Yeah, there's still those people out there who, for whatever reason, still think we live in this world of that mid-2000s edgelord humor, where if you say the most messed up stuff, it's for some reason hilarious. And they're completely and totally blind to the victimization they cause. It's really been bothering me lately, too, that everyone wants to explain this stuff away and justify it because it was so many years ago,
He was so young.
he was so young, or the internet was different back then. Yes, we've literally gone through this podcast right now talking about how the internet was different just 15 years ago. It was a completely different landscape. There were so few people on here, and the creators had an immediate connection with a very small audience. And I think we need, in order to look at this small 15-year period, we need to kind of remove ourselves from a second and look at, say, a history of film or a history of television shows. Now, we all know that there have been television shows and films out there in the world that have not aged well.
Mm-hmm.
For example, one of the films that people considered to be a masterpiece for a very long time was by the filmmaker D.W. Griffith. He created this film called The Birth of a Nation, and in it he utilized some of the most cutting-edge filmmaking techniques, right?
At the time.
And the content that was in the film at the time spoke to a certain segment of the population. But if we look back at that film nowadays, that film is disgustingly racist. It is a horrible film. People don't even want to bring it up. It's just an awful, disgusting film. And there's so many examples of that. TV shows from the 60s and 70s. Well, were the women treated well in those TV shows?
No.
No. Have they aged really poorly?
Yeah, and therefore, the networks that used to carry them don't carry them anymore, right?
Yeah.
Or I've heard recently lots of shows, they've been taking out an episode or two that was inappropriate or in some ways racist or problematic, and people are taking out those episodes, which is good because the problem with leaving these episodes or these movies up is that these things eventually get ingrained in people's minds as normal.
Yeah. And this is one thing that I think is really important to talk about in this environment these days. We have, and I can't believe it's happening in the 21st century, in the 2020s, we still have people of color being murdered by the police.
Mm-hmm.
This is appalling. This is the climate we are living in. We live in an incredibly white-centric, ethnocentric environment that hates people of color. And everything is systemically built to be an advantage towards white people. And every single day, people of color have to fight against that. In not only going to school, not only getting jobs, but just walking down the street and not getting killed. And it's not okay to perpetuate those kinds of ideas, which have already been denounced in The Birth of a Nation, right? That film from 100 years ago. Nobody watches that anymore because of the racism. But then we have people like Shane Dawson and other YouTubers who have not even been called out yet,
Mm-hmm.
who continue to perpetuate the same racist stereotypes, the exact same ones, who do the blackface, who say that people of color are somehow dumber. That is harmful. That actually has an effect on the police officers who are going out there and walking our streets. What if one of those guys was 19 years old, rookie on the job, and his whole formative years, he watched Shane Dawson talk about people of color the way that he did? Right? That formed that police officer's thinking.
Flipper has actually shared with me some of his experiences growing up in school. Was it public schools?
Yes.
Here in the United States. And the amount of racist things that he was taught by teachers is crazy.
It's insane, right?
Yeah. Thankfully, you had a family that was sound enough to teach you to treat everyone equally and not listen to those things. But even just years ago, people were still officially teaching these racist behaviors to children. And one of the things that influences that prejudice is, of course, media. And it's important that those things get taken off to not encourage more people to think that's normal or okay.
Yeah. One thing I did want to talk about, though, is other YouTubers who are doing these things.
Yeah, here's the thing though. I don't know many YouTubers that do those things because I don't watch those people.
Yeah.
So it's kind of difficult. I only know by when these like exposés come out, right?
It's really weird because looking back at creators that I've watched in the past or media I've consumed, I'm actually shaken quite a bit. Since this controversy came out, it made me look back objectively at creators I've liked and really taken a long, hard look at their content. For example, the biggest one, the guy who actually broke YouTube, PewDiePie, the man who was maybe not 100% responsible, but like I'll say 65 to 70% responsible for the original Adpocalypse. He was sitting there making Nazi jokes. He was making jokes about selling women who were slutty into slavery. He was doing all of these things, and people just thought it was okay. And when people did come for him and companies were like, whoa, we don't want our brand associated with that, and everybody came for him, everyone was like, oh, the mass media, oh, this, oh, that, they're coming for YouTubers. And at the time, I almost kind of felt like that was the case. Like everyone was trying to squash, this YouTube creativity. But that wasn't the case. If I have a brand and it gets associated with that kind of behavior, I would be furious.
Absolutely.
And so, looking back at someone like PewDiePie, I definitely think that was completely justified. If you're going to sit there and say those words and say those things, and a company doesn't want to sponsor you or give you ads, you have absolutely no right to feel like you're entitled to it. Again, these people became famous way too young, way too quickly, and now feel like they're entitled to the money that corporations used to give them. And let's also not forget that Shane is in those clips with other people. We know the people that he was in those clips with making those disgusting jokes. His, I guess, ex-girlfriend, I don't know, her name was Lisbug or Leasebug. Lisa Schwartz, is that who it is?
Yeah.
Okay. Lisa Schwartz, holy wow, some stuff has come out about her.
It's not just one person, lots of people were complicit.
Yeah.
For sure.
Not even complicit. I mean, threats and jokes of assault.
Even themselves doing borderline criminal things.
Yeah, and everybody's so focused on Shane Dawson's past, and they're focused on just the beauty community's drama. Go look at comedy YouTubers.
Yeah, what about everyone else?
Yeah, comedy YouTubers. They've been using assault jokes and grooming jokes and bestiality jokes. I know for a fact, like just off the top of my head, there is one massive YouTuber. His name is Tom Ska, who within the past couple years, practically for an entire episode that he put out, was talking about sexual relations with a dog. The whole
Wow.
And this wasn't back in 2009 or 2011. This was like a year, maybe at best two ago. These kinds of jokes are still happening, and everybody's furious that Shane Dawson was doing it 10 years ago. People are still doing it now.
We definitely need to start reshaping this platform so in the future we can have much more productive and positive content, because there's so many good creators out there, and it's a shame that these people who have done so much wrong are still the ones getting the views, getting the coin, and meanwhile, other people who are trying to bring positivity and good things are not being recognized at all. And the reason is because I guess there's lots of problematic people in the world.
Yeah. And there's just this thought that the more problematic you are, the funnier you are, the more interesting you are.
And it brings in the views because people like, I guess, to see shocking things.
Yeah.
But I'm glad that now other people are standing up and trying to hold people accountable.
People do need to be held accountable, and I think it does everyone a disservice for these people to continue to have careers while they've made money. And that's the thing, is people are so worried about these YouTubers.
They're fine.
They're fine.
Believe me.
They're millionaires living in expensive houses with...
Houses, no, mansions.
Thank you for correcting me. Mansions with like custom cabinetry, expensive furniture. They eat out every day.
Wear designer clothes and jewelry, have 20 luxury sports cars.
They have personal trainers. Oh, I'm so sorry if the constant stream of ad revenue money disappears and you like have to sell 14 of your 15 cars. I don't feel bad.
I mean, if you do something racist or homophobic or problematic at your job, being a normal person, you will get fired. Why do these people get a pass?
They don't. That's what I'm saying. There's nothing special about these creators that means they get to have a pass. And I'm noticing that there are some people like the Epic Mealtime guy. I did see that he came out like bashing Tati Westbrook, saying that like, I forget, he was just standing up for Shane Dawson. That's all I know. Why would you stand up for Shane Dawson? And it's because he's had a problematic past too. It's because all of these YouTubers know, every single one of them know, that as soon as people start coming for Shane and going into his super, super awful, disgusting past, people are going to come for the rest of them. Everything's going to get exposed, and people are going to have to answer some questions.
That's true. They're all covering each other's butts.
Yeah, they can't do that. They're people. I don't care how much money they have. If they lose their platform, that's fair.
It's a consequence. If you do stupid things, you will have a result. And if that result is losing your platform, well, so be it.
In the end, I'm really hoping that Dramageddon 3.0 or Carmageddon, it really starts a movement on YouTube, because I am sick and tired of the same old OG YouTubers playing like they're poor. Like Shane Dawson pretended like he was poor.
Graveyard Girl did the same thing.
This is something they all do. They all pretend they're not doing as well off as they actually are.
At least in that regard, Jeffree Star has no problem with flaunting his wealth instead of pretending like, oh, I'm so poor. Not that that makes him any less problematic, though, guys.
Oh, yeah. He is just as problematic. He's just willing to admit... Well, he's willing to admit he's rich. He still claims to be the victim in all things.
And, you know, at first, when people started, there were rumors here and there about, like, Shane's not a good person, Jeffree's not a good person. Not now where we have all the, like, video evidence, right? I'm just saying, like, in the beginning where it was, like, he said, she said, right? I was like, well, you do really have to not just believe everything you hear, because so many people are trying to take each other down and things like that. But now, seeing a bigger picture and seeing that Shane has done all these, like, sexual abuse jokes and also not jokes. He's had this terrible behavior, and then he's been associated with Onision, who is also accused of child grooming, and then he's also associated with Jeffree Star, who was associated with Davi Vanity, who also has been accused of this. You just start to see that this is all connected, and it's like, it's very difficult now to be like, oh, well, maybe not, you know, because why are all these people knowing each other and, like, being accused of the same thing?
There's a pattern there.
Mm-hmm. I read a comment that someone said about Onision, because he had, and I don't know if I'm pronouncing this correctly, Onision?
Sure. I don't like the guy, and so you could call him Onion Son, and I wouldn't care.
Onion Boy. We all know
Onion
he's
Boy.
Onion Boy.
Yeah.
Onision came out about like maybe 2 years ago or something. I'm not good with time frames, but he accused Shane of like being inappropriate towards children and things like that. And Shane was like, "I'm not that," and he was really angry. And now with all this evidence coming out, it's like, well, I mean, you can't really say that you didn't do a video that you did.
And we all see. And you left up. Like, how like, I just want to stop for a second and just take into question, like, Shane Dawson. Somebody literally comes for you for this stuff. You get all of this forewarning, like, people are going to start digging into your past, right? And you leave every video up for anyone to find?
Yeah.
Well, thank you for doing it, because we got to find out who you actually were, but...
That's true. The comment that I read said, "It takes one to know one."
Oh, yeah.
Because, I mean, yeah, if these people are running in the same circles, it just kind of solidifies this idea. And it's really sad because we all know that this happens in Hollywood all the time. And it's just like, we really wanted YouTube to not be mainstream media, but it's literally turning out to be the same.
Yep, everyone gets rich, everyone gets famous, everyone buys mansions. Next thing you know, they're all grooming children. And it's really awful because the authenticity's gone.
Yeah.
I don't know who these people are anymore. There's nothing real about Shane Dawson or PewDiePie or any of the big YouTubers out there. They're all fake people putting on characters, and they try really hard to seem. They try so hard to seem like they're actually authentic people, and they're just not. Once you have millions and millions of dollars, you can't mentally and situationally and emotionally get on the level of a person who is like making $9,000 a year at a part-time job in their first year of college. You know, you can't get onto the level of a person who's still in high school, because you are elsewhere thinking about a multi-million-dollar mortgage and thinking about 50 sponsorships and getting to know all of the PR people at these like 10 different companies. You're not a person who's accessible anymore. So the authenticity that we crave so much from these people on this platform is gone. And what we're left with are these people running around in these groups being disgusting together.
You know, one thing that rubbed me really the wrong way with Shane Dawson's apology video is that he didn't seem sad or regretful or anything like that. He just seemed angry. He was like screaming at the camera.
He like got shaky at one point and screamed like, "Oh, they figured me out," and he wasn't remorseful.
And obviously if he would have just taken down the videos and like shown some growth and stuff. But being that not only did he not take down the videos, but also continued to have some of these behaviors behind the scenes, I mean, it really shows that you haven't learned anything.
Yeah.
And we can't support that.
And I'm also getting really tired of people saying, "Oh, they already apologized for it. He put out an apology already. Why is he apologizing for this again?" If you do something like that, you will always be apologizing for it. The things you do in your life, there are consequences for. There is not a magic word that makes child grooming go away.
That's true. Also, apologizing after you have been called out for something does not give us a good impression. It's literally like, oh, people came for you, so you put out an apology. It's not, you made an apology out of your free will. And yeah, these are not, I hate it when people call them mistakes. Oh, everyone makes mistakes. Having predatory behavior, that's not a mistake. You don't do that by mistake.
I think that's really, 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 really dumb that they always try and cover it up with that. We talked about earlier how prior to the launch of YouTube, the world was a different place because everything was censored. These jokes were not okay to tell. People didn't tell jokes like this on television or in movies or things like that because they were bad. And if someone told a joke even close to this bad, it was in like a rated R movie. and it was like a bad character saying it.
Mm-hmm.
You know what I mean? Don't come 15 years after you've made these jokes and done these horrible things and pretend like you had no idea.
Yeah.
You knew. All of these people were either late teens or they were adults. By the time YouTube came out, they had all lived a life prior to the big YouTube explosion. All of them were stuck watching Saturday morning cartoons and TV sitcoms and things where people acted a certain way and they didn't make these jokes because that's what was socially acceptable.
Also, if something was a quote-unquote mistake, then you would think that it would, let's say he did make a racist joke or a grooming joke or something like that. Well, he would have done it once or twice, been like, oh no, that was a mistake, and not done it again. But we're literally seeing dozens of videos, and I bet you there's even more.
Yeah.
It was time after time after time, and that is not a mistake. That is you thinking that's okay. If you do something bad and then you're like, oh, I shouldn't have done that, I'm sorry, that's more likely to be a mistake. But if you have a repeated behavior over years, and here's the thing too, okay? I bet you that he did get criticism for those videos back in the day.
Oh, yeah.
He probably just deleted the comments though.
Yeah.
Or didn't care.
Oh, this is something you'll remember and I'll remember. Do you want to know what we called people like that back in the day?
What?
Haters. Someone comes on and they're like, hey, your video's really offensive. And it's like, oh, shut up, hater.
That's true.
You know, like, you just can't handle the joke. What? It's funny. That was the mentality. And that wasn't okay. It wasn't okay then, and it isn't okay now.
Mm-hmm.
So I think that's it for as far as this general discussion goes, as far as the Shane Dawson
and other problematic
YouTubers. I really do want to tell people, if you can handle seeing these very problematic and triggering things and you want to find out more, find out the truth, research his fiance Ryland, research his ex-girlfriend, look into the pasts of these people, Colleen
and
Ballinger.
all of his friends.
Yeah, all of his friends.
Tana Mojo, Trisha Paytas, Jeffree Star.
Let's talk about people he's done series with, like Graveyard Girl or Jake Paul. You know, not the best people. Look into them. Look into other creators like Colleen Ballinger, who I didn't even think of this, but she's a horrible person who's done things too.
It has also come out that she had grooming behavior towards minors. You know, sometimes we forget that women can also have these kinds of terrible behaviors, and that's not okay.
No, it's not. I definitely think a lot of the times, if you see a female YouTuber, like, having these grooming behaviors towards little boys, it's seen as funny. It's seen as, like, more of a joke.
Ugh.
And it's disgusting. It's not.
Yeah.
It's not funny.
You know, everyone always says when they see something that they're sick to their stomach. And I consider myself to be a very, like, thick-skinned person, I guess. I actually watch lots of true crime, so I'm not, like, too affected by these things, although I cry a lot sometimes with those videos. But I truly, this time, seeing Shane's videos was sick to my stomach. I literally felt like a knot of nausea and disgust. And I think it's just because it was so shocking and disappointing to me. And also, I can see how many people he hurt. All of those children that were in those videos with him, they're probably all traumatized.
Yeah, and it's really scary if they don't know it now. You know, if they still have that kind of haze where they're like, oh, it was Shane Dawson, the big YouTuber, and it was so cool to meet him, blah, 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 blah. 10 years from now, after Shane Dawson is long gone and we have no idea where he is.
Long gone from YouTube, to be clear.
Yeah, long gone from YouTube. From the public eye, he's no longer a creator that everyone watches. When these girls grow up and they have trust issues or they have interpersonal issues and they look back and they see, oh, I feel this way, or I have these fears, these anxieties as far as being in a relationship goes, because when I was 12, my cousin said sexual things towards me. Or I went to go meet my favorite YouTuber and he started saying horrible things to me. Or I found my favorite YouTuber on, what was it, Omegle or whatever. And he started screaming at me, telling me to twerk for him. I was 12. These girls are going to have to go back and reconcile that.
Yeah, it's really sad. There's going to be a lot of work that these people are going to have to do through like therapy and things because of this. And I don't know how someone can be like, "Oh, it was just a joke." You know that thing with the like cookie. "Oh, it's just a cookie." Those things are not right. They mess you up in the head. And I really hope that all of the alleged victims are able to heal and seek help for these issues because it's really sad that they're going to have to carry this for the rest of their lives.
It's awful.
And for the parents out there, please protect your children. Make sure to know what they're watching. Sadly, in these clips, there were some parents that were complicit with Shane saying or doing these things to their kids. And it makes me really sad because I think as a parent, you want to protect your children, but for some reason, they were starstruck or something, and they let this stuff happen.
I think Shane and his ex, Lisa, when it came to him sexualizing his cousin, right? When it came to that, they both reached out, not to the little girl. They reached out to the little girl's mother to apologize. At which point, the mother said, "Oh, it was okay. She and I consented." No. The mother does not get to consent for the little girl, and a 12-year-old cannot consent.
That is very important.
To being sexualized like that. That is disgusting. It's insane that her mother was complicit like that.
It's really sad.
Well, that's a lot to unpack. I think when it comes to some of the other stuff we want to talk about, like I want to talk about Tati Westbrook's video.
Oh, definitely.
I think we're going to have to push that off to another podcast, but that's stuff I wanted to talk about. I wanted to get that off of my chest.
Yeah, and I hope you guys at least enjoyed having this conversation with us. If you have anything to add, please leave it in the comments down below. Let's all be kind and respectful to each other. And if you guys would like to see more of our content in the future, make sure to subscribe by clicking the red subscribe button down below.
And if you look right to the side of it, there is a bell icon. Go ahead and click that if you want to get notified each time we post a video.
Alright guys, thank you so much for spending this time with us, and I hope you have a great rest of your day.
We'll see you guys in the next one.
Bye-bye.
Bye.